Welcome to LITE It Up, a podcast about resilient women balancing motherhood, their careers, personal lives, and all of the challenges that come along with being a superwoman. Each week, you'll be motivated to take action to lead, inspire, transform, and empower. Now, here's your host, Dr. Aginah M. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of LITE It Up. I am your host, Dr. Aginah M. So excited about this episode, as I am with each and every episode, but this week, I got a heavy hitter for you guys. I think you are really going to enjoy this guest because with LITE It Up, I like to talk about leadership. I like to talk about ways in which we can inspire, transform, and empower other people. And the guest that I have for you all today, she is definitely one of those individuals. Dr. Femi Skanes is, I'm just going to set this up for you guys. Normally, I don't give the person's bio, I let them talk about themselves, but Dr. Skanes is accomplished in her own right. She is the principal of my wonderful alma mater, Morgan Park High School, the best high school in the city of Chicago, if I must say so myself. But on top of that, Dr. Skanes is an accomplished mentor, speaker, writer, school leader. She has, let me count them, how many degrees? She has a BA in Business Administration from Tennessee State University, a Master of Art in Teaching from Chicago State University, a Master of Arts in Reading, and a Master of Art in Leadership from Concordia University, and a doctorate in educational leadership from National Louis University. So in other words, Dr. Skanes knows what she's talking about. And she is also the founder of Leadership Edge, LLC, which we are going to talk about today. But I just wanted to give Dr. Skanes a platform to be able to talk to us about some of the leadership development programs that she's engaged in. We're going to talk about parenting, education, and all of that good stuff. So welcome to LITE It Up, Dr. Femi Skanes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me. I am so excited to talk about leadership, to talk about education, to talk about parenting, all things that are just near and dear to my heart. So I can't say thank you enough for just inviting me to be a part of this podcast. And as we encourage women, as we encourage mothers, educators, I think that there's no limit to who we can encourage through honest conversations, honest reflections. And I just think that as a people, that if we are not honest and if we don't have honest conversations with one another and honest conversations with our young people, then we set them up to repeat just some really disastrous cycles. So I think that honesty can really are the open doors, the open gates to freedom as a people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's get started with, I read off all of your degrees, and, I'm a huge fan of education. And I'm just curious, first, how did you make this transition? You started out with your undergrad degree in business, and then you transitioned to the education track with your master's and your doctorate. Was there some turning point in your life, maybe when you were a student at TSU, where you decided that you wanted to transition into education? How did you transition from studying business administration and then pursuing advanced degrees in the field of education?
So it's a really interesting story. So I've always been a teacher at heart. People laugh when I tell them this, but I started teaching Sunday school probably when I was 11 years old. So my mother was the Sunday school superintendent. I was her only child. So I was just always in tow, always. My mother is a dynamic administrator, a dynamic educator. Though my mother is not an educator in terms of her degree trajectory, she just is in terms of her life study and her life work. So I was just always at her foot, in church and in other places, right? Mm-hmm. And then my dad was a higher ed administrator, and so I just think being around education, it's in my bloodstream.
Mhm.
So, but, formally started teaching. My mother threw me in at 11 years old, like, hey, teach this class. So I'm teaching my peers. I'm learning and teaching at the same time. So anyway, I go off to undergrad, but I've always just been really intrigued by business and by industry. I
Mhm.
had an amazing high school teacher, Dr. Jackson, who she and I are still friends to this day. She's a school superintendent out in the western suburbs. And so I started taking business classes in high school. And I knew then I wanted to major in business. So I get to Tennessee State University. I major in business, had some amazing business professors.
Mhm.
I considered also getting an endorsement in education, but I was blessed and fortunate in so many rights that my mother, just because of her own history, she said, the one thing that I want to do is I want to set you up to be successful. I
Mhm.
don't want you to have to come out of undergrad with loans. So my mother committed to pay for me to get my undergrad degree. But my mother was also very clear, but you got to do it in 4 years. Okay. So had I majored in education, it was going to take 5 years. And that just kept churning. Like, I got to get on this 4-year track. So I decided not to do education. Had a really good job coming out of undergrad. I was a recruiter. So I had an internship with the Walgreen company. They hired me right out of undergrad to be a diversity recruiter. And, on the surface, it looked like things were perfect, right? I had a office space out in Deerfield. I was traveling. I was going to historically Black colleges recruiting, but I was miserable.
Mhm.
I literally was miserable. Like I knew that there was a calling on my life to do something different. Long story short, I ended up having my first daughter, who's now in college. I can't believe the time has just flown, but she's now in college. And so I decided I want to do something different. So in the interim, I started subbing as a substitute teacher just to make ends meet. I got this little bitty baby. And I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. So I started teaching. That's how I got the Masters of Art, right? Because I did an alternative certification in teaching. And I've always been an avid reader. But again, my parents, avid readers, avid writers. My mother still reads. I think she might almost read a book a day. Like, the lady is an avid reader. So I went on to get a Master's of Art in reading because I wanted to make sure that kids understood. I just didn't, all the research says that if kids are not on pace to have strong reading skills by 3rd grade, that's the school to prison pipeline.
Yes.
I had an administrator who told me before I got my Master's of Art in reading, he said, you'll be a principal someday. I said, absolutely not. I just want to be a teacher. Anyway, got the reading.
Mhm.
And then I said, well, maybe I'll consider the leadership. So I did it. But I've known since I was 5 years old that I would get a doctorate, right? So you see how things just kind of worked out. So each part of my degree was really for the next thing. It was never like, oh, I need to get 3 master's degrees, because my dad would, both of my parents would be like, who would get that many master's degrees, right? And I'm like, it was never really my goal, but it was just part of the journey. But the doctorate was always my ultimate dream. And so I finished. I tell young people all the time, one of the reasons that I do lack a little bit of compassion about going to school, I went to college for 14 years.
Yes.
That's longer than most people go from K-12. So,
Right.
and that's the story of how it happened.
Okay. So you taught for several years.
I taught.
And Chicago, were you always a Chicago public school teacher, or did you teach in other?
So I started off as a substitute teacher in Chicago public schools. When I did my alternative certification, I actually went out to the suburbs. I met a wonderful group of educators when I was getting that alternative certification. They are still my friends to this day. They're still like my sisters to this day. One of them is even my son's godmother. Another one is a principal in the suburbs now. Another one is a CPS principal. So we're all still very close. But so I taught in the suburbs for 5 years. So now let me tell you how I ended up in CPS.
Yes.
I had the Masters of Art in Reading, and it's actually a K through 12 certification. And so, but my teaching certification started off as a K-9. So I taught elementary school before I taught high school. And so I said, oh, I have this K-12 certification. I wonder what else I could do with it. Literally, I was up one night just looking at jobs, and I saw a posting that said Chicago Public Schools, reading department chairperson. I didn't even know what the job was about. I was like, oh, I got these qualifications. I'll just apply. When they called me for the interview, I couldn't even remember that I had applied. I don't even know what they were talking about. They were like, you applied for a position. I was like, doing what? Like, what have I applied for? And so they were like, we would like for you to come in for an interview. So that's actually how I left the suburbs to come to CPS that's when I made the transition to high school. So I served as a high school reading department chair. For a couple of years. What a lot of people don't actually know or don't remember, which is funny because it was really such a volatile time. When I entered Chicago Public Schools, I was a teacher at Finger High School. And my very first year at Finger High School was actually the year that Darion Albert was killed. And so I was a part of that turnaround staff that was there when all of those things were happening. So when people are watching, some of the documentaries and on those things about the story of Darion Albert, I lived that. I know Liz Dozier. I was a part of the leadership team when Liz Dozier was there. So there were a lot of things that I learned at Finger High School. And so I was there for a couple of years. I worked with another amazing educator who accepted a principalship, and he asked me to become his assistant principal, which is how I made the leap into administration. And now I've actually been, this is my 9th year as a high school principal at CPS.
And you're at Morgan Park, which is...
And I am in Morgan Park High School.
We produce some great folks.
Morgan Park High School really is an amazing high school. One of the reasons that I'm passionate about Morgan Park, well, number one, it's my neighborhood high school, right? So I live in the community. So Morgan Park thriving, it means a lot to me personally because my son attends Morgan Park High School, right? So this is not just about other people's children. This is personal for me. And I want to have a high quality neighborhood high school. And I say this all the time. I'm a product of a selective enrollment high school, and I don't take anything away from them. They do some amazing things, right? I went to Whitney Young. I had an amazing experience. But as an educator, I don't believe that parents should have to opt to send their kids to a selective enrollment high school for them to have a high quality educational experience. So I work every single day to make sure that what I was able to access at Whitney Young, that students, for whatever reason, right? Aptitude is one part of an educational experience, but it's not the end all be all of who people become. And so just because, first of all, have you ever talked to a 13-year-old? Just because a 13-year-old is not set to get into a selective enrollment high school doesn't mean that their opportunities, we should close the book on their opportunities and say, hey, kiddo, you just weren't good enough. Like, that's not how education works, right? So we're an African people. That's not who we are as a people. And so I have to work to make sure that my kids, in their mind, people know, like, don't say anything about my kids. We have a problem. I don't care what they did. I'm like that protective mother. I have to make sure that they have an opportunity. So that's what I work for. And it's also why I've been so committed to neighborhood high schools for the last, 13 years. Yes, there's room. There has to be room for every single student to find their career path. Their selective enrollment, it's just not the only option in Chicago.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, when we won't say how many years ago I was at Morgan Park, but obviously it was quite a few.
A couple, yeah.
I grew up I grew up in Inglewood. I'm not from Morgan Park area or the Beverly area. And I was a part of the 7th through 8th grade academic center. And I remember being at my neighborhood school, always being in the accelerated programs, but I had sense enough to know that one of the reasons why I was even recommended to take the selective enrollment test is because of the parental involvement. Because my parents were always communicating with the teachers, at parent-teacher conferences, just always trying to find ways to help me grow and develop. My question for you, because you also mentioned, you're invested in your high school because A, it's your neighborhood high school. B, you're also a parent of a student there. And then you wear the role as as a school leader. How important is it for parents to be involved, actively involved in education? And what does that actually look like? Because I think sometimes, you and I were in a couple of social media groups together. And so we've seen some things over the last year in terms of the perception that the community, the public in general, just has of educators. What is the best way for a parent to be actively involved, in their child's education? What does that look like? Because I'm not really sure that many people actually know how that looks, or how they should go about that.
So, I love this question. Let me give a disclaimer. So I work for Chicago Public Schools, but the values expressed herein with going forward are these are my own personal values and philosophies, and do not represent Chicago Public Schools. So let me say that. And so I say that because parents are everything. They are literally everything. But I think that we have the school system and the parent community, we have a mismatch. And so, I'm sure at some point we'll talk about Leadership Edge, which is, it's my own personal consulting company. It is my baby. And part of my passion at Leadership Edge is to help schools figure out how to engage with parents and to help parents figure out how to engage with schools. It's something that I'm passionate about. People ask me all the time, like how I'm able to stabilize schools or how I'm able to find a success. There's no recipe. I pull out a framework, and if I do A through Z, then I have success. It's literally from relationships. I know parents. I'm on the phone with parents. I know your mother. I know your grandmother, your aunt, what they did, what they said. And so it's this relationship building. But we have gotten to a point, and these are my personal views. We have gotten to a point where we are allowing ourselves to be exempt from being decision-making authorities in the life of a school. We have to stop letting schools make decisions for our children's future. We should have a voice. I tell parents all the time, hold me accountable, ask me questions. Ask me why I made that decision. Ask me what evidence do I have. Parents should be able to challenge me at any time, and I should be able to have a legitimate reason for why I made a decision. And if I can't do that, then I'm not doing what's best. Number one, the very first thing that parents need to do. We're too busy doing whatever we're doing, and we're too busy to read email. Sounds like a little thing, but it is a big thing. This is not 1980. Schools are not picking up the phone, calling parents one by one. There are mechanisms for how we do that. But when I hear parents say, I don't have time to read an email, I'm just saying to parents, then you're going to be disadvantaged because schools communicate via email. It's the number one mechanism. So I encourage parents to know this. How does that school communicate? Does that school communicate on Tuesdays via email? Is it Friday? So know the rhythm, right? At our school, it goes out on Sunday night so that by Monday morning, parents have it. If I know that the communication comes out on Monday, now I'll be honest, I laugh even with my husband. If my husband asks me a question that I know went out in the parent communication, I won't answer him either. Because I tell him, read it. We sent it home. Okay. My son, don't ask me because I'm your mother. Read it. We sent it to you. You have to know when the school communicates and make that a part of your rhythm. So set an alert on your calendar. If we have time for social media, we have time to read the emails that come from schools because most schools communicate that way. That's number one. Number two, stop letting schools make decisions for us. Parents, especially in Chicago, we get upset when the doors close. Well, we can't wait until the doors close. We have to be at LSC meetings. Parents, I would say, probably every single school in our community qualify for Title I funding. Do you know what's part of Title I funding? Title I funds are federal funds. Do you know what the federal government says? If that school gets Title I funding, a certain amount of money, I believe it's 1% of that Title I budget, has to be earmarked for parent engagement. Schools have thousands of dollars that have to be allocated for parent engagement and managed by parents. Now, it would be interesting for you to see how much money goes unspent every year because schools can't get parents to manage it. Now, another one that steps on people's toes. I hear this all the time. We need more programs in our community. I take exception to that. Schools have plenty of programs, but do you know that schools struggle to get bodies in the seats for those programs? And then we end up having to close them because we don't have enough. I've heard parents say, my kid is not interested. They're interested in what we make them interested in. Kids have too many options at 5 years old to tell what they're not interested in. Oh, so I can go on and on about that. We have programs. Now we have to invest the time to get them there. So, but I don't believe, now I argue with schools. I don't think that this idea that if parents don't run up to the school that they're not engaged. Engagement looks different. If I'm checking emails, if I'm making sure that my child is at school every day, if I'm making sure that they're ready, then I am actually engaged in the life of the school. I don't have to sit in your boring meeting that could have been an email or a YouTube video for you to determine if I'm engaged. So I believe in working on both spectrums. We got to police ourselves and say, how can we be better parents? And schools, you have to figure out why you can't get these parents to come up here. They're not coming up here because you don't talk to people right.
Yeah. You touched on a lot. And I know for myself, I tell this story a lot about how I've been actively engaged like throughout from pre-K up until the twins are 11th graders. My youngest will be a freshman. And whether it's PTO, whether it's going to a coffee chat, or whether it's just, like you said, looking at a webinar or going to a school board meeting, I've always, because I want to know what's going on. For me, and I'm no longer in Chicago, my children, my older two children started out in CPS in kindergarten, and then we moved shortly thereafter. But I want to know where my tax dollars are going. I want to know, what are you planning and working on? There used to be a time where I was the only parent in a school board meeting. And the school board thought that I was coming to complain or something was wrong or I had a problem with a teacher, because for years, they didn't have parents at school board meeting. And that's where all of the decisions were made, you know. So there are definitely different ways for parents to get involved and to know what's going on and to hold the schools accountable.
But schools have to meet parents also where they are.
Right.
And so I laugh about this all the time with my football team. I go to a lot of football games, and they know this. I don't like football. I don't like anything about it. I think, and so I'm just like, oh, they're going to get hurt. Oh, you got to hit each other so hard. But I go to football games for two reasons. Number one, because I don't love football, but I love my kids, right? So I go there, but my love for them makes me say, I got to just go out here to support my kids, right? And that's not just football. It's all, I go to all of those things, right, that I'm not a huge fan of personally, because I love kids. But number two, parents are there. So if I can't catch you at the school, I can catch you at the football game. I literally just had a parent conference at a football game about a month ago. The parent was like, oh, well, she was like, I'm so sorry I missed you on Friday because I got busy at work. Do you want me to reschedule? I said, no, you here, I'm here, and he's here. So we can do this right here. Yeah. So there's no reason, because simply it's just a conversation, right? So it's not about getting in trouble. It's a conversation for his success. And if the three of us are here right now, then we can talk about success right now. So that's why it's important for school leaders to also go out, and we can't expect people to come to us, and we have to meet them where they are. About This was about 5 or 6 years ago. So before I was principal at Morgan Park, I was principal at Al Rady School for Community and Environment for 6 years on the west side of Chicago, another amazing school. Much of who I am can be credited to Al Rady. I mean, I still to this day, I love Al Rady. If there's a program, and if it's good for Morgan Park, I always try to see, is it good for Raby too, right? Like I send them things too, or if it's something that's West Side, I'm like, hey, make sure they're included too. I still love Raby.
Mhm.
We had an amazing football team, but we were struggling with getting enough parents to come to the football games. And so I told the football coach, I said, this year, before these boys are eligible for football, every single parent has to come to my parent meeting. I know parents work, and I said, so if not, they're going to have to find an adult in their life, but they have to come to this meeting before you put them on the field. I mean it, and I'm sticking to it. We had 100% parent participation. Every single parent came. What I talked to them about, I said, listen, the boys love for me to come to the game, right? And they ask me every week, will I be here? I said, but if they want me to be there, they want you to be there. I know you're busy. Here's the schedule. Make me a promise. Promise to come to 2 games this season. Try to work your schedule. I'm giving it to you in advance. That particular year, because I asked them, we fill the stands. I'm talking about every single game. We're packing it out more than we'd ever done before. That year, we went to the playoffs. In fact, we were one of the only schools on the west side of Chicago. I can't remember all of the rankings, but to ever advance that far in a state championship. And we would have wherever we went, we would have made it to like the next level, right? We lost like right in the semifinals. And so the coach and I talked about it, and we were like, man, it was a good year. I said, but do you know what was different this year?
The parents.
We had parents in the stands. It brought a different kind of energy. I said, we packed the stands it started from maybe you being there to they're bringing out old grandmamas, babies were wrapped up in blankets. Parents make the difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as I'm listening to you, I love the way your leadership style in terms of just, as you've mentioned, meeting people halfway, meeting them where they are, right? How would you describe your leadership style? What would you call it? What type of
Crazy. My leadership style is very relational. I like to know every single educator in the building.
Mm-hmm.
I like to know what strengths they bring. I like to know what area that I can work on developing them. I want to know what's going on with them personally. When they show up every day, I have to understand that they're humans too. I've had I've had a lot of staff members in the last 18 months to lose a parent, and now having lost a parent, I understand what that means to have to show up every day when the grief is heavy, right? So the relationships with educators mean everything to me. I believe in knowing every single child individually. I look at student grades individually every single week. I want to know of my teenagers who's dating who. That seems like they think I'm just being nosy, but I understand. I need to know that because I need to prepare for the inevitable breakup. I know you think y'all gonna be together forever, but when it falls out, and you sitting by the locker crying, I need to know that today is breakup day, right? Mm-hmm. So because I need to know how I can help you. It might be little for adults, but it's big for teens. Mm-hmm. So my leadership style is very relational. It's about how I can bring people together. It's about how I can leverage the strengths in people. Because education in many ways uses a deficit model. What can't they do so we can teach them what they don't know? But I believe in what do they bring to the table so I can use their strengths to help where they have some deficits.
Okay. So let's talk about how you launched Leadership Edge and how that comes into play with your work. So you are developing other school leaders who definitely need to take page from your book. So I'm glad that you're doing this because I think it's phenomenal what you're doing because I'm watching, I don't have children in your school, but I'm watching because, Morgan Park means a lot to me. But why did you decide to establish this consulting firm, and what's your primary goal? Let's talk about the services that you provide as well.
So one of the things, I started off by saying we have to have some honest conversations, right? So I'm definitely strong in my leadership, but where I can say an area of development is sometimes I feel like I let life happen to me. Sometimes I feel like I don't necessarily have a strong plan. It's just that doors just kind of open. And so I did not sit and write a plan for Leadership Edge. Leadership Edge happened the same way me becoming a principal happened because I kind of let it happen to me. And I said yes. But people would ask me all the time, can you come? I do a lot of conference workshops, right? And people would say, oh, that was so amazing. Can you come to my school? And in my mind, I was like, yeah, how would these people pay me? Right. So I just was like, but I mean, I majored in business. So I was like, I can't take this in my personal income for tax reasons, right? So I'm like, I got to figure out how I'm going to make this a business model. Literally, that's how I came up with people just asking me, can I come talk to their schools? So I was like, okay. So my cousin, who's an attorney, she is my attorney. She's right on 87th and Stony Island, the law offices of Brittany Kimball. I said, can you do an LLC for me? And she's sometimes I still remind her she's my baby cousin. And so she was like, you can do this yourself. I said, you could do it too because you're an attorney. So how much is it gonna cost me? Right. So we argued because she was saying, you could do this. Yeah, you could too. So she filed the paperwork. Leadership Edge actually sat for I had it, but I wasn't really doing anything with it. Then the next year comes around and I have to file state of Illinois papers. And so she was like, your papers came, you need to take care of this. Excuse me, you're the attorney. You need to take care of this. So it was just kind of sitting. And then I knew that I wanted to do something with it. And by this time I shifted from presenting under my name to presenting under Leadership Edge. So that was my very first step in kind of what I wanted to do. Okay. The second thing is I always knew that I wanted to own a space, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with the space, but I knew I wanted to bring people together. Okay. So by this time I'm presenting under Leadership Edge. I'm thinking about how I can utilize it. Well, then the pandemic hits. And it just gave me more time to think. Now, a few years ago, I also wrote an equity framework. It was a snow day, and I started thinking about just equity and what does it mean for equity to live in school. So I've just had all of these things and they just kind of came together. So Leadership Edge came together in a way. It just kind of happened. It wasn't a business plan. Have no fear, people. I have a business plan now. I've gotten my life together and I really do have a structured business, but it did not start out that way. It was a seed in me that said that I want to work with schools, I want to work with parents, and I want to work with kids. And so my core values are real simple. Leadership is a lifestyle, parenting is the promise, and equity is essential. And that is really what I present around. So I have a lot of clients now. In fact, I've been blessed. I'm still figuring out how I'm balancing it. I have some clients on the East Coast. I have some charter school clients. I just have different people that I work with. I'm doing a parenting presentation for the most illustrious sorority in the whole world, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, which I am a member. So I'm doing a parenting workshop for my sorority on Thursday. I'm presenting at a virtual conference on Wednesday. So all of those things I really do under my business model. And during the pandemic, I was blessed to be able to purchase a space that is now the corporate office and the home to Leadership Edge so that I can offer workshops and conferences, but I believe in community. And so my space is also in partnership with other LLCs and other non-for-profits who are looking to somehow improve the community. And so I look to see how we can collaborate, right? So if you want to offer a space on, hey, how to get you started in your podcast, then I say, okay, how can we collaborate and use Leadership Edge to offer those workshops? So that's kind of the story of how I got started.
So with the workshops with the parents, because, That's where my focus is, and of course students as well. What type of response have you received from the workshops that you're doing with parents, and what are some of the topics that you are focused on when you're working with parents?
So let me tell you how I really started working with parents.
Mm-hmm.
I have this knack for always being a difficult parent whisperer. Okay. I can work with parents that most people don't want to be bothered with,
Mm-hmm.
because schools can be judgmental places.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, here she comes. I'm not saying that some days I'm like, oh, I laugh with kids. I'm like, don't call your mama. Like, don't call her. Because we already know how she's gonna act, right? And the kids laugh too, because they already know how she's going to act. Well, when your mother gets here, somebody's got to deal with her. So I guess it's going to be me. And so I started really being able to engage with some of the most difficult parents. But it was really an aha moment for me, because they have a story.
Yes.
And so their story, a lot of times, is why it seems like their behavior is erratic. I believe this wholeheartedly. There's probably only 1% of the population of parents that does not care about parenting.
Mm-hmm.
The other 99% care, even if they don't parent the way that you parent. Okay. That doesn't mean that they don't care about their child. They just may not have the resources, the know-how, the emotional strength, the emotional well-being to know how to parent in a way that's healthy for children. So they may show up a different way. But it's not because they don't care. It's because they do care.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, girl, I just tell them we're not about to do this. Hey. So, and it's usually the moms, right? And so I started being able to just engage and to really help students turn around because of the relationship that I've built with parents. And so I started saying somebody has to be able to engage with the parents that nobody wants to engage with. Why not me? Mm-hmm. And so some of the things that I do talk about is how to parent during the difficult years,
Mm-hmm.
how to parent a difficult child. Is hard. And people can get so judgmental. Just because kids can be a handful doesn't mean that the parent is not trying. It might mean that the parent doesn't know how to leverage resources to get the kids the help that they need. I am a strong advocate for how do we parent in blended families. Mm-hmm. That's a tough one. Been there in that, and I get it. Mm-hmm. And another one that I'm passionate about is how do we set our lives up to make time, to make parenting a priority. Parents don't realize that sometimes they haven't made it a priority. They think that they have, and it's not intentional. It's not malicious, right? And I say, okay, a 15-year-old girl, if you survived a 15-year-old girl, you're on the way to heaven or whatever afterlife you believe in. But guess what? Most parents, I say, hey, when was the last time you and little Miss Difficult went out to dinner together? Mm-hmm. Just the two of you all. Mm-hmm. But, they're like, she doesn't want to go. Guess what? She actually does want to go. Yeah. But emotionally, she doesn't have the vocabulary to say that she really wants you to spend time with her. So she acts like a brat, when the truth of the matter is that her behavior says, take my little bratty body out and pay me some attention. Mm-hmm. Parents are like, I don't want to take her anywhere. I didn't say you wanted to take her. I said you should take her. And so just helping parents to just navigate during some of those difficult times. And sometimes I have to say to myself, am I using with my own 3 teenagers what I'm saying to other people? Because I love my baby son with everything, but sometimes he stomps and grits on my last nerve. Mm-hmm. And I have to check myself and say, I'm not doing what I advise other parents to do. And it literally checks my conscience, and it makes me more patient with him, because I understand what it's like to be impatient with a teenager.
I'm so glad that you said that, because I also have 3 teenagers, except for I got a set of twins who are Geminis. So my joke is I have like 5 children in my house. But I remember going through a period of time with my daughter, Aaliyah. It was like when she turned, I think 12, it was between 12 and 15. I did not really care for her too much. It was just, very challenging in terms of the personality. And then I started thinking about it. This child just wants my attention, and not that I wasn't giving it, but just that one-on-one time. So you definitely have to stop and reflect. I don't think that any of us are perfect as far as our parent. I don't think there's a such thing as a perfect parent. We're all learning by trial and error, et cetera, and you have to parent your children differently is what I think. At least that works for me. But recognizing, when there's something that's off, I guess, and trying to find ways to connect with your child as quickly as possible, before situations get out of hand, has really been something that has worked for me. But I also have to check myself every now and then, because I have, friends and other people, colleagues, who will ask questions of me about parenting, and I'm giving advice. And then sometimes I'm not following my own advice, and I have to, check myself.
But another parenting tip that I would love to offer, we have as a people, in some ways, have gotten away from the village. Okay. We have gotten so defensive that we will not allow people to be part of our village. This whole idea of you can't say anything to my child, I'll tell a parent in a minute, hey, me and your child will not be able to coexist in the same space if I can't say anything to them, because my job is to also help develop them. As parents, we have to allow other healthy adults to have a space to say something to our child. We have to lean on the village during these difficult times. I have been amazingly blessed. My mother, who was an amazing mother, but I don't know who she is as a grandmother. She's so just soft and
Yes.
But
yeah,
I'm like, who is this lady who was like, hey, with me, my mother was, she was definitely very nurturing, but a non-negotiable nurturing. You didn't ask her when she said no, you don't ask her again, because for your life, you dare not ask her again, right? So she was just non-negotiable in that way. I knew boundaries. And sometimes I'm like, I guess she don't have boundaries, which is funny. She does. It's like some things my kids know that they can't go so far, but she's been a phenomenal grandmother, and she steps in the places where my kids need another adult. She's another adult, right? So she's the village. My son has amazing godparents. My son has amazing godparents. I couldn't trade them for the world, which is another tip I tell parents. Get your kids some godparents to have life experience. Stop picking your friends. Start picking people who can help you raise them. So when I've had enough, his godparents step in. And even though they're his godparents, they help me, they give me advice with the other kids, right? We have to have a village. Sometimes parents don't want, they may not want their child to talk to another adult. Well, if she can't talk to me, she can't talk to anybody. No. She needs to be able to talk to somebody. And if it's not you right now, that's okay. As long as she has another healthy adult in her life, or he has another healthy adult that he can lean on.
You are so absolutely right about the village. Fortunately, I definitely had my mom and my dad, who were an intricate part of, my children's lives. But I also made friends, or became friends with my children's friends' parents. So my children will say, well, they talk about me being a certain type of parent. So everybody knows. You can't just tell me, oh, I'm going to such and such house for a birthday party or something like that, and I don't know the parent, and I don't know all of the details, I've got questions. You can't, I just need to know that the people that you are going to be around are going to make sound decisions, are going to look out for you the same way that they will look out for their own child. So that's the type of village that we have. We're all friends. And if my child is going through a situation, they know that if they can't talk to me about it, especially for my son, since he's the only male in the household, there are times he's not going to talk to me about certain things, but his best friend's dad is someone that he could talk to and feels comfortable with talking to. And they treat him, they don't say, oh, this is just, they call him their son too, and so that's the type of all of my children's, they're very close friends. The parents and I are all friends, and we all look out for, each other's children. And I think that has helped us, because we're raising our children together essentially, and, helping one another out. And I definitely agree that we need to get back to that. And over the years, there are so many reasons why as a community, we are not in that space. But I think when you look at everything that's going on, that is definitely a key, to us taking back control of our communities and just all of the different situations that are impacting our children. How do you think?
Here's one.
Okay.
Just really quickly. I hear parents say, and I understand the premise in this. My kids can't spend a night anywhere. Well, then you probably are about to mentally break, because sometimes your kids need to spend a night somewhere, not for them, but for you, because you need a mental reprieve as a parent. I'm not saying let your kids spend a night anywhere, but then my question becomes, where's your village, right? Where's your kids have to have a safe space other than just your house. So I have a really good girlfriend, one of my best girlfriends in the world. We went to college together. Our kids are pretty much in the same age, except her youngest son is younger than the other three, right? But so my two that I birthed, and then I actually have another one that God gave to me through marriage. So I have 3 teens, but my two, that I did birth and have grown up with, her oldest, and now we have the baby. He's the run of the litter, right? She's part of my village. And so if they can't spend a night at her house, we got something like, then why is she my friend, right? Like, why is she a close part of my circle if I couldn't trust that in her care that my kids will be safe? I'm saying that we have to make sure that we have a village or a safe space. And it is because we as parents need a mental reprieve. And we need to know the only way you're going to have a mental reprieve is if your kids are someplace that you know that they're safe and you don't have to call. And that's just that.
Yes. Amen and amen. Because yes, I definitely have that village. I definitely do. So I know we can talk about a whole bunch of stuff for days. I think we're going to have to do a part 2.
Absolutely.
But what I wanted to ask you, because you did mention you have blended family, you have 3 teenagers. I want to know, how do you balance it all? Like, how do you balance being, a mom of teens, being a school leader, being a wife? Tell us. We need.
And there's another part that we haven't talked as much about, but there's also my role in the church. And so I, sometimes I laugh, and Lord, I hope my pastor doesn't see this, but I'm like, hey, I don't work at this church, right? But I kind of do. I just, I don't get a check from them. So I have all of these things. And then there's another thing that we don't talk about when we get to our 40s, but it's what happens in our role of being children, because our parents start to need us differently than they, up until about 30 something, we needed them.
Right.
But when we get into this age, they need us differently, right? And so we have an obligation to also be able to help our parents. So we have all of these different things. So the very first thing is how I use my time and my boundaries of no.
Mhm.
Everything can't be a yes. I've talked about a lot of things, and my kids get in my time, and my mom needs me for certain things, and the church needs me, and the church is not the church in and of itself, but my relationship with God is my number one priority. And I don't feel bad when I tell people like, hey, like God is always going to trump every other thing that I have going on, even including my parenting role. But then there's the wife role, right? And my husband and my time with him. And so there are some no's and there's some balance, but I really do look at my calendar to say, how do I make time? One of the reasons that I've been successful as a school leader, I talk to leaders about this when I'm training leaders. We have to talk about your personal relationship. I'm talking about your significant other.
Mhm.
Is your significant other going to be a support in your role in school leadership? And if that person says, I need a spouse that gets off at 4 or 5, then A, you have to talk about if you can accept that job, or B, you're going to have to talk about if you're going to stay in that relationship. And that's an ouch moment.
Yeah.
A lot of my success is because my husband is 100% supportive of my role. So if we have an issue at school, we could get called. We're literally on call all the time. People don't know that, but we really are on call all the time. So I get up this morning. My church has morning prayer 6 days a week at 6 a.m. So I said, okay, I'm not an early bird, so
Mhm.
it's a sacrifice, God. So this morning I said, let me get up and get on the prayer line. Well, right before I got on the prayer line, I checked my email and I was like, oh, I got a notification from Safety and Security. Let me call and make sure that kids are okay, because we get those notifications if kids are hurt. So I said, I need to call in. So it's 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm on the phone with Safety and Security. Well, who's getting interrupted with this conversation? Or who's also getting interrupted when my phone rings at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, right? It's my husband. And he understands that. And today he was like, why were you so loud with Safety and Security, right? But he's supportive.
Mhm.
And so I've balanced. I make sure that I have time for everybody, but there's something that suffers.
Mhm.
And I will say what suffers is my relationship with some of my friends, because I can't always hang as much as people may want me to hang, or people tell me I'm never available, but I'm okay with that, right? So if for 18 years I'm not available because I've invested my time in my children, then I'm okay with that. But I don't get to hang out as much as some of my friends who don't have similar roles.
Mhm.
But I've also made friends with a lot of principals, and so we get that we've been planning to go out for 2 years and haven't gone yet, but we're still friends with each other.
Right, right. So I want to make sure that people know how to get in contact with you if they are interested in obtaining your services, whether they have students that need to go through some workshops with you, whether it's a parent, and of course, anyone who's aspiring to be a school leader. Where would they be able to find you? Like, I want to make sure we get that out there.
So, and I'm actually getting ready to launch two new services. So I am launching a service for teachers who are interested in going into administration but may not know exactly where to start. I'm going to start. In fact, I am providing individual coaching services, and so when we can sit down, we can look at your resume, we can talk about your goals, we can talk about what experience that you have to have, and so it is an educational coaching and job coaching in preparation for the launch into administration. So that's one service. And then the other thing that we didn't talk about today, but I did kind of hint at the fact that on June 3rd, 2020, my dad made his transition to be with the ancestors. And so my sisters and I have started a non-for-profit, Worrill World Incorporated. And so the whole mission of Worrill World Incorporated is to give scholarships to young people. And so my dad loved Chicago Public Schools and loved students. And so we're looking to give scholarships to students every year. But my younger sister and I have decided that this year, instead of just giving out scholarships, we are going to do scholarship essay writing workshops as one of the criteria to be eligible for the scholarship. And so as we get ready, and then my younger sister is really passionate. She wants to do, she also wants to offer a gap year scholarship. And so, so anyway, I can go on about the scholarship. So those will be two new services that we're offering. So one for educators and one for students. So stay tuned. People can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn at Leadership Edge LLC. So again, Facebook and LinkedIn. They can also find me on Twitter at Femi Skanes, Femi Skanes, Skanes. So Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. People can find me on YouTube. They simply at Leadership Edge LLC. My website is fssleadership.com. So so that's Femi Sophia Skanes, fssleadership.com. And then they can also email me at leadershipedge2020@gmail.com. So people can reach me in a variety of ways via email, leadershipedge2020@gmail. And then you can also reach me on my website, fssleadership.com.
Perfect. Now, I know there are so many different topics that we didn't touch on. And it did take us a little bit to get this scheduled because I think I reached out to you months ago, and it's just been a whirlwind of just all sorts of things happening on my end. But I am putting you on the spot right now so that when people see this, they'll inbox you and say, hey, when are you coming back on Light It Up? I need for you to make a commitment to come back so that we can continue our conversation, because we've got some other topics that we need to kind of like dig a little bit deeper. I definitely want to talk to you about blended families and more in-depth conversation about that and just some other things. So will you commit to coming back to Light It Up?
I will. And hopefully, I say let's do it before the school year ends. So if we can get another segment before the close of June of 2021. Are we in 2021?
We are in 2021. Yes. And you know what? That was the other thing. Oh my goodness. I wanted to ask you about, because high school students are back in school. Hybrid. No. Is it hybrid?
Hybrid.
Yeah.
It's hybrid.
Let me just tell you, I'm so confused and just all over the place as far as who's doing what. And I definitely wanted to talk to you about that. So we have to come back to kind of talk about that, because it's been over a year since the high schoolers were physically in the building. So I know that has, how did the first week go?
So I was exhausted last night. I literally was like, Jesus, I'm tired. Because essentially I had 2 first days of school in the same week.
Right.
I had my group A who came Monday and Tuesday. I had my group B who their day is Thursday and Friday, but we didn't have school for parent teacher conferences. So their first day was Friday, right? You have to remember that I have freshmen who did not finish 8th grade in a school, who did not start 9th grade in a school. So this was in the 3rd quarter of freshman year, their first time being in school. So we've been in the school building. We've been in school. And I have to tell adults, stop saying it's just school. You, my friend, have never had to go to school 5 days a week on a computer. Even if you take, and I've heard people say, I took online classes. No, ma'am. You took a couple of hours on a computer. It is not the same. So it's been a huge lift. But I was so excited to see young people. I'm so thankful. When I say this, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. It is amazing to me, and I'm so thankful and grateful for the opportunity that people trust me with the most important thing in their life, which is their children. So I did not take it for granted that people trusted me enough to say, I believe that you care about kids enough that you've committed to making this school safe enough. And I trust you enough that I'll send my child back. Because essentially that's just the decision that parents made. They said, I trust that you have ensured that that school is safe enough for me to say yes for my child.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I think about that, that's the assignment that God has given me. I don't see that people serve me, I serve people. And I understand that before I educate any child, that the number one thing that people trust me with is their safety.
Yeah.
And I take that serious. So it was great. It's a lot to teach freshmen in the third quarter how to open up a locker. So I've been down on my knees unlocking lockers all week. But it was a good week and they transitioned well, and I think it'll just get better.
Good. Here. I'm happy to hear that. And then I'm sure with them trying to figure out the classrooms between new building and old building and
no, I've been doing this long enough to know. I got my juniors on one day, I got my seniors on the other day, and we had I had them to do building tours and words of encouragement. And so they took them out and they did tours and showed them how to get to lunch. And I told the seniors and the juniors, don't teach them any foolishness. I trust you. So it was a good week.
That's good. That's good. I'm happy to hear. That is really, really great. Well, we are going to get a date on the books, and you'll be back before the school year ends. So we've got that already set. And I want to ask you one final question. So based upon everything that you've done, you've accomplished thus far, what would you, as you reflect on just, where you are professionally and your commitment and service to children and families, right? Mm-hmm. What would you tell your younger self as far as how to prepare for who Dr. Skanes is today?
I would tell my younger self to not to necessarily abandon the plan, but I would tell my younger self to not be quite so serious and have more fun younger. That's the one thing that and when we have our next segment, I'm going to talk about one of the reasons why I am so in love with my 18-year-old daughter, because I think that she is a more free version of myself. She, in a lot of ways, is who I could have and maybe should have been, in terms of just being a little bit more free and having more fun. So in some ways, she's the best part of me, and in some ways she's the worst part of me. We laugh about it all the time, right? So she's not nearly as serious as I am, and I love to see just how much fun she's having in school. And then when we have tough conversations where I think she can balance just a little bit more seriousness, but she's just an amazing young person, and I'm so thankful that I have been able to raise her to have fun and to be focused at the same time.
Well, I'm looking forward to that conversation. So I just want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today. It was certainly a pleasure. I am looking forward to our next conversation on LITE It Up. And for those of you in the listening and viewing audience, make sure that you check out Dr. Skanes' website, Leadership Edge. Follow her on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, and contact her for some consultation services as well. But in the meantime, make sure you all continue to have a wonderful week and light it up and shine bright like a diamond. Thanks for joining me this week on Light It Up. Make sure you visit my website at www.lightituppodcast.com or www.aginahmuhammad.com. You can also find me on social media using the handle @LightItUpPodcast. If you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes
or you can simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time, light it up and shine bright like a diamond.